It's Wednesday, it's 11:15 and we're live in Westminster.
This is the best, they say, 100-day start of any president in history, and everyone is saying it. We've just gotten started. You haven't even seen anything yet. It's all just kicking in.
President Trump celebrates his first 100 days in office. Will the next 100 be as dramatic? Tony Blair says current net zero policies are doomed to fail. Is he right? After weeks of campaigning, local elections in England take place tomorrow. Party leaders are making their final pitches to voters. Election guru Professor John Curtis will tell us exactly what's at stake. And it's Prime Minister's Questions at noon. We'll be live in the Commons. Joining me today, Labour Mayor of West Yorkshire, Tracy Brabin, Conservative MP Lewis Cocking, Liberal Democrat MP Jess Brown-Fuller and Sebastian Payne from The Times. This is Politics Live. Hello and welcome. As you saw in the headlines, President Donald Trump celebrated his 100th day of his second term in office yesterday with a big rally and a campaign-style speech. Let's hear a little bit more of it.
And we're here tonight in the heartland of our nation to celebrate the most successful first 100 days of any administration in the history of our country, and that's according to many, many people. This is the best, they say, 100-day start of any president in history, and everyone is saying it. We've just gotten started. You haven't even seen anything yet. It's all just kicking in.
Oh, my question to the panel, starting with you, Sebastian Payne. Do you expect the next 100 days of the Trump administration to be as dramatic as the first?
Absolutely. There's so much more coming down the tracks of what Donald Trump has predicted, but also the consequences of the first 100 days, because we had the April 2nd Liberation Days, he called it, about tariffs, and the impact on global trade are going to start emerging in the coming weeks ahead, because the way containerized shipping works, it takes about 20 to 40 days for this to hit. So I think about mid-May, you will start to see the real effects of that, and that could then start sending the US economy and the wider world economy into a recession. Plus, you've got the ongoing peace talks between Ukraine and Russia, where Donald Trump has said if there's not a deal in the next couple of weeks, he'll just walk away from it. So it's, again, very high-stakes stuff as well, combined with his efforts to pass a budget and bring in massive tax cuts and his continued war on the bureaucracy of America. And listening to the president everyone talking about what a wonderful 100 days it is. First of all, I think Franklin Delano Roosevelt might have something different to say about that, given how much consequential legislation he passed and reshaped America in the first 100 days. Second of all, the polling doesn't quite stack that up, that Americans are broadly in favour of tackling the so-called woke culture within the bureaucracy and pulling back on government waste, but they are much more sceptical about the economy, and that's always been Donald Trump's strong bit, and he's now very much in negative territory on that, so it's not quite as rosy as you heard there.
Well, I'm exhausted just listening to you, Sebastian, in terms of the next 100 days. Your party, Jess, and your party leader, Ed Davey, have very much taken the anti-Donald Trump stance and position in British politics. Do you think the next 100 days will be equally dramatic to the first?
I think Donald Trump has made it very clear that the volatility is not going anywhere fast. So he's definitely run at the first 100 days. He says everyone is saying what a great job I've done. I think that just suggests that he's not really listening. There are plenty of people saying that he hasn't done a great job, but unfortunately, I don't think he's planning on slowing down anytime soon.
Lewis?
Well, it has been a very dramatic first 100 days for Donald Trump. I mean, what I'm concerned about is the impacts on tariffs on the British economy, and the Labour government have really got to get on the front foot and start really progressing this trade deal, because that is what we need. They've made some terrible decisions about the British economy with their tax on jobs and the national insurance increase. We really need to see them break through with Donald Trump and really get a trade deal. Whether we like Donald Trump or not, we've really got to work with him and get the best trade deal for British workers and protect British jobs.
Do you think it'll be as dramatic, and do you think Keir Starmer should change his approach?
No, I don't actually, because nobody wins in a trade war. And I think this cool head approach has been really welcome. In West Yorkshire, our exports to the US is 1.3 billion. So we're set to have an additional cost of 130 million. So, of course, it's really important. But when he says, you know, it's the best 100 days, the economy doesn't suggest that. tourism is falling. There's definitely an impact around the world from what he's implementing. And certainly as mayors, we're building relationships with mayors across the world and mayors in the US. Personally, I had a great trip with Nashville, with the mayor of Nashville. I took businesses and academia and creative businesses to create jobs and opportunities and collaboration. The health tech bridge between Nashville and West Yorkshire, that's not going to go away. We're going to continue that work, but we really need the central government of the US to understand that their mayors also want to see greater relationships with our country.
Right. What does the mayor of Nashville think of what's been going on then so far in terms of Trump?
He was struggling like many mayors with transport, so he was trying to get his buses under public control when I met him. But I think he's definitely open to using their brilliant universities. Vanderbilt University is one of the best in the world. Leeds University, one of the best in the world, coming together as partners and businesses coming together to have that health and life sciences bridge, which is a good outcome.
Let's talk about net zero, because the former Labour Prime Minister has certainly been talking about it. Let's have a look at this headline. BBC News: Blair says current net zero policies are doomed to fail. In a new report by the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change, the former Labour Prime Minister has called for a major rethink of net zero policies. He says the public have lost faith in climate policies, and he says any strategy based on either phasing out fossil fuels in the short term or limiting consumption is a strategy doomed to fail. Is he right, Tracy?
Well, to some degree, he is right in that it shouldn't be on the shoulders of the most vulnerable and the poorest in society. But in my community, Hebden Bridge, Mytham Royd, where communities have been absolutely devastated by flooding, of course we have to take a view. Now, I look at it from the economic point of view, where I have to get people's energy bills down. I also have to have cleaner air. That's why we're bringing buses back into public control.
But when are those bills going to come down,
buses.
Tracy Braben? Because we've heard this. It was in the Labour manifesto. It was a promise to bring bills down by £300 a year. But when? That's not going to happen anytime soon, is it?
But it is happening around the country, and certainly it is. It is because in West Yorkshire, for example, we have retrofit 5,000 homes that will have lower bills. We're also working with businesses to match fund their interventions to bring down their costs of energy with new plant equipment.
But you say you agree with Tony Blair on the fact that it shouldn't fall, the cost of net zero shouldn't fall on the vulnerable in society. Is that what the government's been doing, placing the costs on people who can't really afford it?
Well, no, I would disagree, because their ambitions for EV vehicles, for example, that's really important for Bradford, a clean air zone that has brought down child asthma. It's fallen off a cliff because of the clean air zone in Bradford.
Right. Do you agree with Tony Blair?
I do agree with Tony Blair, and I'm pleased that Tony Blair actually agrees with Kemi. When Kemi set out her policy last couple of months in terms of changing our policy on net zero, she completely set out the right path. We've got to take people on a slow and steady journey. We cannot have the poorest people in society paying for this, and we've got to make sure we produce more of our energy at home. That means issuing new oil and gas licences. We need to have a mix of energy. That is what energy security is about, a mix of homegrown energy. So that includes oil and gas, and it includes renewable. This whole farcical stuff about reaching net zero in 2030 or whenever the date is just ludicrous.
Well, it's 2050. 2050 is the target. Tony Blair does still agree with that target by 2050, so he doesn't agree with Kemi Badenoch on that, because your party leader has dropped what was a Conservative, a previous Conservative Prime Minister, Theresa May, who set that target in training, well, in law. Now, the author of the report is very clear. They think the targets are important to give certainty to business. So where is the agreement exactly with Tony Blair?
Well, he's come out and said the policies that this Labour government are doing to reach net zero are ludicrous, and
they're similar policies to the ones that you had under previous Tory.
I wasn't in the parliamentary party then. I stood because the parliamentary party wasn't going down the right track at the last election, and the British people decided at the general election they didn't want any more of us and they wanted a Labour government. But you've got to take people on a slow and steady journey. This cannot happen overnight, and it is forcing bills to go up. Labour Party had in their manifesto to bring down bills by £300, and it is another broken promise by the Labour Party.
Tracy?
Well, I would absolutely disagree because
So have
we're
bills come
going
down?
to be
bills come down by
we're going to be
£300?
in thrall to people like Putin. Do you want us not to have control over our energy?
And we need more homegrown energy. That means issuing oil and gas licences in the northeast of Scotland.
No,
that doesn't mean
means
importing
offshore,
importing gas.
It also means solar panels. You've seen that this government are focused very much on solar panels across the country, on schools,
So you think
on public
our farmland
buildings.
should have
It's not
solar
about
panels on there?
farmland, and I think this is a really unnecessary pivot from the Conservative Party to talk about solar panels and immediately shift to farmland, because what we need is a combination of both good agricultural land, obviously the farmers feed us, but also we need to have independence from people like Putin.
Jess?
So net zero is the future. And we absolutely need to be on a journey, and we need those targets.
But are the policies the correct ones?
I think Tony Blair's comments were nuanced, and so I didn't read it as he was agreeing with Kemi Badenoch saying that we shouldn't have targets. He absolutely does.
Yeah, but
he doesn't believe he doesn't believe that the legislation that's in place and that the journey that we're on is going to get us to that target in 2050. So the Liberal Democrats are very clear. We need that target, but we don't think there's been enough focus on community-based energy and bringing communities with you when you are investing in renewables, which is why we tabled an amendment to the energy bill to make sure that community energy was part of that journey. But also, I think in the net zero conversation, I had a group of college students from my constituency that came up to Parliament to talk about a study that they'd done on hydrogen for air travel, and they were incredibly excited about the future of net zero and about the opportunities that it brings within STEM, within engineering. And so we are on a journey, but there is more that we can do.
Well, let's talk about the journey, because Tony Blair says that voters feel they're being asked to make financial sacrifices and changes in lifestyle when they know the impact on global emissions is minimal. Is he right?
I think that people shouldn't, I do agree when you say that the burden should not be on the poorest and the most vulnerable in society.
These are voters across the board. They're being asked to make sacrifices and changes to their lifestyle when they know the impact is minimal when it comes to global emissions.
I think it's up to every single one of us to make slight changes about how we use energy to get us to a point where Tracy mentioned flooding. That's a huge issue in my constituency. We are seeing an entire community of Selsey that is being threatened to fall into the sea at some point. If we do not do something about this, then we are going to lose communities.
If I could just jump in there very quickly, just say it's also about jobs and opportunities. Those people,
but a lot of people, according to the report, say they haven't seen these jobs and opportunities.
We in West Yorkshire set up 1,000 green jobs for young people and created those jobs, so that it is possible when you have those interventions.
Where are you, Seb?
Well, I think on this that there's actually quite a growing consensus here about the fact that having unachievable targets is not the way to make good policy making. And the key thing here is not the 2050 target, it's the 2030 target for decarbonising the power grid, because Labour had promised that 100% of that would happen by 2030. It was downgraded to 95% in the manifesto, and there's still a lot of scepticism about as and when that is going to happen. And when I read this report from Tony Blair, I thought that at least in the tone, he was echoing the words of Kemi Badenoch, because she was the first person to come out and say we need to rethink this. But in substance, it's not at all clear what Mr Blair is trying to achieve with this, because he's not actually saying we need to think again about the targets, which is what Ms Badenoch has said. And what it really seems to me is he's having a kick at good old Ed Miliband here, because Ed Miliband has obviously a long time warring going on with Tony Blair about the direction of the government and where it's all heading. And Ed Miliband is the last kind of bastion of pushing for net zero come what way, where Mr Blair is trying to say you need to be a bit more pragmatic. I think on the point about bills, though, we should remember that Keir Starmer, I think, did promise to reduce bills by £300 in the Labour manifesto. The only way to get to that, the only way is more nuclear power. And I think renewables will play a role in that. But I think what we haven't seen enough from the government, this is where I stand on this, is building more nuclear power. We need to get Sizewell C built, which we're, I think, waiting and pending.
It will take a lot of time, though, won't it?
It will do, which is why we need to get on with it now. And I think one of the things the coalition government got badly wrong was not continuing Mr Blair's plans to get more nuclear power stations, but we need big ones and small ones as quickly as possible.
Is Tony Blair having a pop at Ed Miliband, the Energy Secretary?
Well, I couldn't possibly possibly comment about that, but what I would say...
Well, you can, if you like, yeah.
Is that in the North, we have the history of manufacturing. It's in our DNA. And if we are going to grow the economy, we have to invest in the jobs of the future. And the jobs of the future
But the
are
point
in
is, Tracy,
green
is
tech.
taking people with you. Now, maybe you are in West Yorkshire, but across the country, the report seems to point that people are not being taken enough along the journey that Jess was talking about. How do you do it then, Lewis?
Well, you've got to come up with competent policies to allow businesses to create economic growth whilst being environmentally friendly.
So it's all about fossil fuels?
No. If we put too much red tape around trying to be green really, really quickly, those jobs will leave the United Kingdom and go abroad to places like China and India. We've got to work on a global level to reduce CO2 emissions from across the globe. Our CO2 emissions, we've done incredibly well for getting them down from 1990 levels, and we've done absolutely exceptional of doing that. And we are so small in terms of the global CO2 emissions. If we don't work together with our global partners on this, it doesn't really matter what we do in the UK.
But do you accept some of that progress is because we've outsourced a lot of manufacturing? We're still buying goods made in China where the emissions are much, much higher. So the progress we've made is based on what we call territorial emissions.
This is the hypocrisy of this Labour government. They're happy to buy oil and gas from abroad, but they won't allow us to issue new oil and gas licences from the UK.
I think the thing that voters actually just want to hear is certainty, and that's the problem of this whole debate here, because...
Well, don't you have certainty?
Well, there's legal certainty in terms of what was passed, and don't forget this legislation was passed by Theresa May's government when everyone was thinking about Brexit, and not to think back to those unhappy days, but this went through with about half an hour of parliamentary scrutiny, and it has the most consequential change about how our country's economy and manufacturing base is going to head in the future. I think it would be a mistake to pull back on our current renewable trajectories. Offshore wind is a British success story, and I think that is a good thing. We've got manufacturing bases in Hull that make many of the turbines, and if you look at Tees Valley, for example, the Conservative Mayor Ben Houchen has had lots of success again in building a turbine factory, so we should do that. But the whole debate shouldn't be one or the either. We need to do more than one thing at once.
Exactly. On the other side, this headline in BBC News, government not taking climate seriously, say advisers. This is the report Climate Change Committee publishing their recent report, and they're pressurising the government to go faster and further. The journey that you're talking about, Jess, you say slight changes to people's lifestyles, but when people are being asked to change their lifestyle quite dramatically, let's say get rid of gas boilers at some point in the future, consumption should come down massively. Are you being honest with your voters in your constituents about what they need to do?
Absolutely, because the Liberal Democrats have been calling for the warm homes scheme. We've been saying that we need to retrofit homes to bring energy bills down far quicker than we have been for a very long time. There has not been enough focus on making sure that people have energy security by warming their homes so they are not so reliant on their gas boilers. But also, you talk about kind of bringing communities along with you. One, the businesses that I've met in my constituency are really frustrated because they are ready to adopt net zero. I met with a huge grower who was proposing massive investment in their area with solar panels and heat pumps, and they couldn't connect to the grid. And they were being told that it was going to cost them millions to be able to connect to the national grid. So we need to do some serious work on the national grid to make sure that those businesses can do what they want to do, because they want to come on this journey with us.
But heat pumps are expensive, aren't they? People would have to fork out an awful lot of money up front for something, lower bills that may happen in 50 years.
And I think this is the point about this debate, that some elements of renewables are cheap. Wind power is cheap and is doing well. Other elements like heat pump, like carbon capture are not there. And I think just have a good point about the grid, that, you know, if we've got 99 problems on energy, the grid is certainly one of them, because it's the single biggest issue we've got about getting renewable energy into where it needs to be consumed. But I think this comes back to a much wider question about planning and environment law and how to get this stuff built in a sustainable way that has the consent of people. And I just think all politicians of all parties have not really been honest about the trade-offs about which way you're going to do this, to bring people with you, to get bills down, and to do it in a way that is not necessarily going to, is going to help.
Well, Lewis, do you want to respond, and then Tracy on that?
In terms of the term net zero, what does that even mean? Everything produces carbon, so I don't even think we're being honest with the language that we're using around this debate. Look, I'm a geographer. Who doesn't want to plant more trees? Who doesn't want to buy environmentally friendly cleaning products? So we can do small things in our lives, but we're not being honest with people. I mean, what does the term net zero even mean? I mean, if we asked everyone on this panel, they'd all give you a different answer. answer. We've just got to live our lives in a more sustainable way without making it too complex.
Yes, but how do you nudge people into...
How do you nudge people in a more sustainable way?
It's not, because everyone wants to plant more trees. I haven't met one person that says, you know what, planting trees is a bad thing, Lewis, we shouldn't do that. So there are policies out there that we can do. For example, the tax on a 5p carrier bag, that has worked tremendously about reducing plastic and what have you. So there have been examples of where people have been able to do it in a logical way. But the term net zero doesn't mean anything to anybody, because nothing can be net zero, and we're not being honest around the costs to reach
Well, what does it mean to you? What's net zero to you?
Well, it's not the right term to use, because nothing can be net zero. We need to reduce our carbon, but net zero means producing no CO2 at all. Well, that is practically impossible.
Right. Tracy, do you agree with that?
It's emissions in the air that are going to impact on our lives and to warm the planet. So there's a couple of things that are in there. One, the grid is a challenge. When Microsoft were coming to set up their data centre in Leeds, real challenge, but collectively we got over the challenge of getting them on the grid. But to your point about it has got to have people's backing, we are saying in West Yorkshire, the heat pump is a part of a scheme. You are not paying for it, so you will not be impacted financially. And we have a Solar Together scheme where you can get a loan to pay for the solar panel on your home as part of a collective
let Lewis respond.
and a community. So it doesn't necessarily cost the individual, but we have to do, I do agree, a better job of bringing people with us.
But building that heat pump produces CO2. So that's not net zero, is it?
It's a complex...
It may not produce it here, but it could produce it somewhere else. But yes.
It's a complex picture, carbon.
All right, let's talk about something completely different. This headline here, call to fine headphone dodgers who play music on buses. This is a Liberal Democrat policy, and it has caused some discussion and debate. Everyone can relate to it one way or another, I'm sure. But this is fines of up to £1,000 for so-called headphone dodgers who play loud music and videos on public transport. It's not very liberal, is it?
I think the most liberal thing is that everybody can use public transport willingly and happily and not have to listen to somebody else's music or video or podcast. And, you know, we want to be encouraging more people onto public transport. And antisocial behaviour, there is already laws that prohibit antisocial behaviour on buses, on trains, on any form of public transport. What we are saying is that we would like a public awareness campaign across the country so that people understand, actually, if you want to listen to your Netflix show or your podcast or your music, please do it with some headphones in, because 51% of people from polling shows that they would not feel comfortable telling somebody, please don't do that, even though that they are not enjoying the experience or the journey. So we are just saying everybody should be able to use transport freely and comfortably without having to listen to somebody else's choice of music.
Is this a policy you could get behind?
So look, although I agree entirely with the sentiment of this, I think this has to be one of the most single unworkable things I've heard of. So, Jess, what would be the fine for putting your feet up on the chair on a bus?
I think it's more to do with the fact that it's public awareness. So actually, we are saying that there could be...
The fines are not real, but what do you mean?
Of course they are. No, because we are tabling an amendment as part of the bus services bill. So that is looking to basically allow local councils to put within their bylaws that they could enforce antisocial behaviour, including the behaviour.
Who's going to enforce this on buses?
Well, the bus services bill is already seeking to address that. So
individuals, no, which people? Like who? Is it the bus driver? Is it a policeman? Is it Lewis if he's sitting on the bus there? Who's it going to be?
I think you're talking about a wider point here, which is how are people policing antisocial behaviour in general, and that is up for the local councils that are dealing with their public transport to decide how they manage that. So it's not just about people listening to their music, it is about antisocial behaviour in public spaces in general.
Which I agree, and I think we have got a massive antisocial behaviour problem. I mean, shoplifting is up 52% in the last year, and we do need to think about ways of addressing that. What I'm not so sure is giving fines for very small elements of individual behaviour when you haven't got a clear enforcement mechanism. You know, and I think because you can expand this to absolutely everything. You know, how much are you going to charge for putting gum on the pavement or for not picking up dog poo?
Well, that already exists.
Well,
there is already
let me
fines in
concentrate.
place for those
Would you?
things.
I mean, you're in charge of broadly transport network in West Yorkshire, your area. Would you like to see this on the buses? Bans,
I mean,
fines?
I do think this is quite an extraordinary policy when there are so many other serious issues, but
But is it annoying though?
Of course, it can be mildly irritating, but there might be moments when people can't afford headphones. They are expensive, or maybe somebody's forgotten them and they need to listen to a message. I think this is a bit of a sideshow for what is much more important, which is antisocial behaviour on transport, which is why we've funded 15 PCSOs for our transport network, making sure that we see those high-vis jackets on the bus network. You don't have it on buses, it's on trains. And why we're looking at and I'm pleased to see that Yvette Cooper has tackling the shoplifting challenge, because the threshold was £200. So people were stealing £100 worth and then there was no further action. And also, when it comes to phones, I think I don't know how you feel, but my life is in my phone, and it's so frustrating for the public that they couldn't get, even though they were tracking their stolen phone, they couldn't get it back, that this Labour government have now said that the police will have the jurisdiction to go and get phones without a warrant into those properties.
Is this a policy you could get behind, Lewis?
Look, I commute in every day from my constituency of Broxton, so it is incredibly annoying. I mean, I don't know how people listen to very loud things that early in the morning on the commute, but it's just nonsensical.
It's your age, love.
It's just nonsensical. I mean, how is this going to be policed? I mean, what the train companies and what the bus operators should be concentrating on is fare evasion. That's a really big thing that I see. TfL, where people just ram through the barriers. TfL staff standing there, don't say to the individuals, have you bought a ticket or what have you. So I don't think there's going to be anyone to police this, and I just think most of the public will see this as nonsense in terms of, if the Liberal Democrats want to be taken seriously, they've got to come up with serious, competent policies that the public can get behind.
Right, well, how do you tackle broadly antisocial behaviour on our transport system?
Well, I think it starts off within our school system and education. We've just got to install in people at a very young age that everyone's just got to be nicer in society and polite to everybody, which is a real challenge and which is really difficult. And social media companies, for example, could do more with taking down content that's not acceptable for younger viewers to see. So, but putting a £1,000 fine in for someone that listens to loud music or something on a bus, who is going to police that? Our taxes will be going up to pay for someone to be on every bus to watch whether someone does it or not.
I think in France, I may be wrong, but I think in France there are fines for people who play loud music or TikTok videos or YouTube videos all the time on the trains and buses. And there are fines for other sorts of antisocial behaviour in other European countries. So it's not completely unique, this idea. But I'm afraid you don't have the support of the panel here, Jess.
But also, I mean, Tracy's pointed out, you found 15 PCSOs. That's fantastic to be on your public transport. You found the budget to be able to offer public transport, to have PCSOs to have a presence. We have enforcement already in place for litter. Councils pay for people to patrol the streets, and then you might get an on-the-spot fine if your dog goes to the toilet and you decide to leave it, or if you leave your gum, or if you drop litter. So these sorts of enforcement fines already exist, and it's a piece of legislation that already just supports something that already exists and strengthens it. But it's more about public awareness, which is, we want people to be on public transport. We want more people to be able to feel like they can use public transport, but they should be able to do it.
There's just this tension here between, we have got a problem that we have too little trust in our society at the moment, and this developed over many, many decades. And the question is, do you have things like community policing, which I think is a really important thing to do, particularly for safety on transport, or you've got the kind of more root cause. I think a lot of it is people's individual behaviour, and again, you've got to try and do both these things on. So I just worry with the headphones thing. By the way, I would absolutely love to not be on a bus and have someone blaring out, dare I say, the daily politics on their phone.
What? Politics Live?
Politics Live, I should say.
Oh dear, it hasn't even got the title right.
I know, exactly. But I do think you've got to be realistic about resources here, and I think public safety and fare evasion are more important than music.
Well, let's talk to Professor Sir John Curtis. He's been waiting patiently there because it's local election day and mayoral elections and a by-elections day. Sir John Curtis is, of course, the BBC's election guru, and will be giving us the benefit of all his analysis throughout the night, Thursday night and into Friday. John, tell us about these elections.
Well, we've got local elections for 23 councils, primarily county councils, in England. These are primarily, therefore, in Shire, England, traditionally relatively strong Tory territory. We've also got 6 mayoral elections. These are rather more in Labour territory, and these include 2 new mayoralties, one in Greater Lincolnshire and another the other side of the Humber in Hull and East Riding. Beyond that, of course, we have the parliamentary by-election in Runcorn that is also taking place at the same time.
Right, what's at stake for the main parties in England?
Well, basically, the big question and the big challenge for all the parties is how well are Reform doing? In the parliamentary by-election, there's been a couple of, not polls of the by-election, but polls of what the outcome of a general election would be at the moment. One suggests that Runcorn Labour would win narrowly. The other one suggests that Reform would win narrowly in a general election. So there's certainly an expectation it would be close. If Reform do manage to win, it will be the first time that a Eurosceptic party has managed to win a parliamentary by-election other than when the incumbent Conservative MP stood down and defected to UKIP before the 2015 general election. So quite a lot at stake there for Reform, certainly in terms of reputation. The mayoral contest, well, there we've had some polling of some of the mayoral contests. They suggest that perhaps Reform might win both Greater Lincolnshire and perhaps Hull and East Riding. That's the two new mayoralties. The west of England looks very, very tight, in which could be a 4- or 5-way contest. And Cambridgeshire and Peterborough might actually be a Conservative game, but we'll have to wait and see. So they could present something of a mixed picture, but certainly there is a risk that Labour will discover that this mechanism that they're inventing for devolution in England, which includes elected mayors, is proving something of a gift for their opponents in terms of giving them a chance to have more power in local government, which is probably not what the Labour government intend. Otherwise, the local council elections, well, we have to remember they were last fought over in May 2021. So as well as being in primarily Tory territory, the Tories are defending a high baseline. It was the same day as Boris Johnson won the Hartlepool by-election. As a result, the Tories are defending nearly 1,000 of the 1,640 seats at stake. And given that the Tories are in so much of a weaker position in the polls now than they were 4 years ago, Tory losses are expected, quite substantial Tory losses are expected. The question and where the more uncertainty is, well, will it be Reform that mostly picks them up? Or will actually sometimes Reform doing well open the door towards the Liberal Democrats, Labour or even the Greens picking up seats from the Conservatives?
Professor Sir John Curtis. Enjoy it all when it begins tomorrow. Thank you very much. Laura Kunsberg, my colleague, will be presenting a special programme covering the local election results over on BBC One tomorrow night from 11:10. Now, let's have a look at this headline in BBC News. More local grooming inquiries expected, says the Minister. The Minister in question here is Home Office Minister Jess Phillips. She told Parliament earlier this week she expects there to be more local inquiries into grooming gangs than the 5 already announced. She said she would provide more details about them once an audit, a pretty speedy audit, has been conducted by Baroness Louise Casey into the scale and nature of the problem and when that is published. Now, there have been criticisms that audit's been delayed from this month into next month, into May. Is the reason, Tracy Brabin, the review has been delayed because the government didn't want it to interfere with tomorrow's local elections? It would be too politically difficult?
No, I don't think so. And my understanding is Baroness Casey is still doing this work. And, of course, if we fundamentally think about what this is about, we have to think about the victims who have absolutely gone through hell and back. And this is not just, it's not a political football, it's actually people's lives that we should put front and centre. In West Yorkshire, we have focused really closely on historic child sex exploitation. Since our specialist unit was set up in 2016, we have had over 200 people have gone to prison for over 2,200 years. 50 live cases, 72 more coming down the track next year. Now, the previous government cut the resources and the funding to that particular project. We have, with the Labour government, reinstated those resources and working with victims. We are not just looking in the rearview mirror, but also looking in the here and now when children, girls, and women are being harmed by men. You
have the power, certainly, to call for a new inquiry, a local inquiry, in your area. Are you going to do so?
Well, I'm not going to call for an inquiry because we have had numbers of inquiries across our
Tracy,
region.
you've mentioned victims. They're calling for this in your area. They also would like to see Bradford Council conduct a full inquiry.
The victims I have spoken to, what they want is justice. They don't want talking. They don't want politicians fighting amongst themselves. They want the outcomes of the people who did this put away. And what is really important is Yvette Cooper now saying, if someone has declared something has happened to you or you have witnessed it, you now have to pass that on. You cannot sit on it and hope it goes away.
Well, isn't that the point? It was mentioned, in fact, I think, by Alexis Jay, who carried out a huge review, an inquiry into child sex exploitation several years ago, saying it's action that's needed, not a national inquiry, which is what the Conservatives are calling for.
A full national inquiry into this. We cannot have councils marking their own homework in this. It's too serious for that. There have been a number of reports where council officers themselves have been involved, so we cannot have the same councils marking their own homework. There's got to be a full...
If I may, they're in public with opposition councillors as well.
They don't have the same power as a full national inquiry. We heard time and time again that Keir Starmer was going to put country before party, and this is an instance where he's putting party before country, and he should do a full national inquiry into this.
Right. Tracy?
I absolutely disagree that I'm not sure you have spoken, and put me right if I'm wrong, to people who have been through hell and back, and you have supported them to get justice. Because I was, hang on, I was in Parliament on Monday and listening to Jess Phillips, the Minister, and somebody who is incredibly passionate and determined through experience to get justice for the people who have suffered these heinous crimes. We have to get those people who have done this behind bars. And demanding another inquiry when actually the Conservative government did not act on any of the recommendations, and actually it shames the Conservative Party that they did not act when they were needed.
Well, let him respond to that, Lewis. I will come to you. Lewis, do you...
We need a full national inquiry into this. As I've said, these allegations are incredibly serious. We must put victims at the heart of this. We've had reports where council officers have been involved in this. We cannot have councils marking their own homework. And as I said, time and time again, Keir Starmer, the now Prime Minister, said he would put country before party, and in this instance, he's putting party before country.
Where are you, Jess?
I am in the position where if an inquiry is appropriate, we should absolutely
a
have
local
one.
inquiry or a national
inquiry?
inquiry?
If a national inquiry is called for, if the victims are asking for a national inquiry, that's fine. However, but the priority should be that in 2022, Professor Jay, Alexis Jay, put a report that had 20 recommendations on the desk of the Home Secretary in 2022, and not a single one of those 20 recommendations have currently been implemented. So the Conservatives are using this as a political football, as Reform are, when actually what everybody, cross-party, should be calling for is for those recommendations that already exist to be put in place immediately.
To say we did nothing...
If I can just say, The Times, which has done more than any other national newspaper to uncover what was happening with grooming gangs across England, and our reporter Andrew Norfolk was there in 2011 to expose this, and has done, I think, more than anyone else. We as a newspaper have supported a national inquiry, and the reason for that is the ability to compel evidence and individuals to speak, which the local inquiries, however much there may be specific local facts, and I take your point, Tracy, on them having opposition and politicians in power involved there, it does not have the power to compel people to speak. The also reason for another national inquiry is to look at the underlying factors behind this, because I think what we have seen, and reporting has shown this, not just by the Times but by other outlets as well, is that there are certain communities that have been particularly involved in these grooming gangs, and that is not what has been looked at so far. That having been said, what was recommended in the IICS by Professor Alexis Jay absolutely should be put forward, and the Conservatives should have done that, and they should do that. But again, we need to do both things at once, because there is the historic thing, there is grooming gangs that are still going on at the moment, and there's this wider issue about issues within particular communities that also needs to be addressed.
If I may, I want to thank The Times, actually, for the work that you've done, and for other journalists who have been relentless to try and get justice for victims. But I take the points about waiting for Baroness Jay's
Casey's report,
her comments about what Baroness Casey, what she wants to do. I know that Jess and Yvette are also looking at what the framework would look like, what do local regions want. It isn't just a handful. Of course, this is a horrendous crime that goes on anywhere and everywhere. My problem is if we just delineate it to one group of people, we are looking the other way, and there's just one that's gone through court.
But can you do both, Tracy?
We cannot just look at one group of people, because you are more unsafe in your home with your family member than you are necessarily with strangers outside in the community.
Go on.
No, I take that, but again, that's not a reason not to have a nationwide look at this as well in a different way to Alexis J has done it, because I agree that you need to look at all different communities, but we have seen, I'm afraid, there a predominance of grooming gangs to happen within certain communities, and there are elements that do need to be examined which haven't been examined before, and the danger of local inquiries is that you're not looking at the wider picture here.
But Baroness Casey, that was her remit, to look at ethnicity.
Right, but if she comes back and implies there should be a national inquiry, maybe there are too many areas to have local inquiries, because the government has said that there should be at least 5, but haven't said how do they know where they're going to be until Baroness Casey actually reports? In the end, if the implication is a national inquiry is necessary, will you support it?
Well, of course, we'll wait to see what the outcome is. But one of the challenges also is that some areas in West Yorkshire, our police are outstanding at recording crime. So we might potentially have greater numbers than other police forces where they are requires improvement when it comes to recording crime. So we're not balancing like for like. And I will tell you, everybody around this table knows that this is not just happening in one handful of local authorities. But I would also try to say to politicians, this is not just about the past. This is the here and now. When 14-year-old girls are being raped by other children, we have to also have focus, resources and strategy to cope with the future.
But just to say on that very quickly, that I don't disagree with any of that, but if that is the case, why is the government only putting forward £5 million for these local inquiries? You know, that's a drop in the ocean, particularly if you've got to cover hundreds of places.
All right, we're going to leave it there because we're coming up to Prime Minister's questions in just under 5 minutes' time. Kemi Badenoch, of course, will be asking questions of the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer. You can see the House filling up nicely in anticipation for this week's session. Before we go into Prime Minister's questions, let me just show you this tweet from Chris Philp, the Shadow Home Secretary. The Glastonbury Festival should not be providing a platform or legitimacy to a group. He's talking about the Belfast-based rave rap band called Kneecap that has allegedly incited the murder of democratically elected MPs and expressed support for terrorist groups. That is why I have written to the organisers to urge them to cancel Kneecap's invitation to play at the festival. Just to set it in context and give you some background, this group is pretty riotous, known for being controversial, a band based in West Belfast, or from West Belfast, I should say. But concert videos have shown in one the band allegedly call for the death of a Conservative MP. Let's have a listen.
Tories. The only good Tory is a dead Tory.
Well, the only good Tory is a dead Tory, you heard there. The band say that footage had been taken out of all context and apologised for the hurt caused to the families of murdered MPs Jo Cox and Sir David Amess. Is it the right response, Lewis Cocking, to call for them to be dropped from Glastonbury's lineup?
Yes, because I don't think there would be any context where saying something like that about democratically elected politicians is acceptable.
Do you agree?
I am astonished and outraged that was said. You'll know that the way I came into politics was after the murder of Jo Cox. And you felt at the time that could never happen again. And then, unfortunately, Sir David Amess was murdered. And inciting violence against democratically elected members of Parliament is anti-democracy and is incredibly troubling.
Right. I mean, several Kneecap gigs have been cancelled over the controversy. Should they be cancelled from Glastonbury as well?
I hadn't heard of NECAP before any of this came out, and to be quite frank, I don't want to give them the oxygen because I think that this is what they want. They want to be talked about on multiple platforms. Their comments were horrendous, and it's up for Glastonbury to respond how they choose to respond. But I don't want to talk about NECAP anymore because
so you
they
think
are
they
awful.
should be allowed to perform at Glastonbury?
I think that I don't want to give them any more oxygen because I think they're enjoying this. I think that they're. I think they're enjoying all.
Think about what they've said,
I am
and you
totally
think they should be
agreeing
allowed
with
to
you.
play at Glastonbury.
Lewis, I'm totally
yes or no?
agreeing with you. Well, I wouldn't go. If they were playing, I wouldn't go, and I would encourage others not to go either because I think that they're awful.
What's wrong with that response?
Well, I just think, look, if they'd have said that about the Liberal Democrats, there is no way the Liberal Democrat MP would be sitting on this panel going, do you know what? I don't want to talk about them. People can go if they want. I wouldn't go. It's completely unacceptable what they said, and they should not be allowed to play at Glastonbury.
My feelings towards the loss of Sir David Amess and Jo Cox are not any way diminished by the fact that they were not Liberal Democrats. Please recognise the fact that regardless of the party, whether they have incited violence against any politician, and I say that is totally unacceptable. So please don't make this political.
I'm afraid
I think the comments are totally wrong from that part.
It's time for PMQs.
Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, yesterday evening, Royal Air Force Typhoons successfully conducted strikes against Houthi military targets in Yemen in a joint operation with our US allies. This action was in line with long-standing policy of the UK government to defend freedom of navigation in the Red Sea after Houthi attacks fuel regional instability and risk economic security for families in the UK. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to say that all UK aircraft and personnel returned safely, and I pay tribute to the professionalism and bravery of all our servicemen and servicewomen. The Defence Secretary, Mr. Speaker, is making a statement immediately after PMQs. Mr. Speaker, can I congratulate Prime Minister Mark Carney on his election in Canada? Our two countries are the closest of Commonwealth allies, partners and friends, and we will work together to deepen our economic relationship to benefit working people here in the UK. Mr. Speaker, may I also congratulate everyone across the House, including members of this House and the Press Gallery, who ran marathons in London and Manchester. In particular, the Honourable Member for Gordon and Buchan for the fastest run of any female MP. And, of course, the Shadow Justice Secretary, who I'm reliably informed is still running. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Clive Jones. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to associate myself with the remarks of the Prime Minister about the professionalism of our armed forces and also congratulate Mark Carney on being elected as Prime Minister of Canada. And also everybody who took part in the London Marathon. Both my daughters have done it. It's something I can't do anymore, sadly. Later today, Mr. Speaker, I'm introducing a bill to guarantee Parliament has the final say on any trade deal, including any agreement with President Trump. This isn't new. It's exactly what Labour promised to do in an official policy paper put forward in 2001. I'm asking this government to keep its promise. Currently, members of Parliament have no vote. They have no voice on trade deals. So, will the Prime Minister...
Order. I think the Honourable... What, this is good. I think you're on a marathon yourself. I think the Prime Minister may have got a bit. Prime Minister!
Well, Mr. Speaker, can we extend our congratulations to his daughters for running the marathon? In relation to trade deals, the government retains the right, obviously, to strike trade deals, delivering growth, jobs and opportunities for working people. We clearly set that out in our manifesto. That's exactly what we're doing. Parliament, as he knows, does have a well-established role in scrutinising and ratifying these deals. He knows that was strengthened under the last Labour government, as he references.
Dan Tomlinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. there's going to have to be a coming together of Reform and the Conservative Party in some way. A deal, a pact, or a merger. These aren't my words, Mr. Speaker, but those of the most senior Tory in elected public office in the country, the Mayor of the Tees Valley. So if senior Tories are plotting it, the Leader of the Opposition won't deny it, doesn't that mean that the only way for us to stop this plot is to vote Labour?
Well, it's no need to answer. You've no responsibility for any part. Right, let's move the Leader of the Opposition. Can we move on?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On Monday, the Prime Minister's safeguarding minister admitted on the floor of the House that there was a cover-up of the child rape gang scandal. Does the Prime Minister think we should expose this cover-up?
Mr. Speaker, this is obviously a serious issue. I oversaw the first grooming gang prosecution, which was in Rochdale more than a decade ago. There is a contrast here because the Leader of the Opposition, when she was Minister for Children, Women and Equalities, never raised this issue in the House in 3 years. Mr. Speaker, the Shadow Home Secretary held 352 external meetings during 20 months. How many were on this issue? Not one. And they failed, of course, to implement a single recommendation for the independent inquiry into child sex abuse. Mr. Speaker, my position is absolutely clear. Where there's evidence, the police should investigate and there should be appropriate prosecutions. That's route number one. Route number two, we should implement existing recommendations, which did expose what went wrong. They weren't, those recommendations were not implemented by the last government. They're being implemented by this government. We are providing for local inquiries. We're investing more on delivering truth and justice for victims than the party opposite did in 14 long years.
Mr. Speaker, in the last year of Conservative government, we had a gangs task force that found 500 perpetrators, protecting thousands of victims. We launched that inquiry that he's talking about, but more still needs to be done. It's now 4 months since I asked him for a full national inquiry. Instead, he promised 5 local inquiries. There will be one in Oldham. Will he now name where the other 4 inquiries will be?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we are providing for local inquiries. This is a serious... Well, they've got so much to say now. Why did they not... Mr. Speaker, why did they not implement a single recommendation in the 14 years they had in office? We're taking forward those. There are recommendations already in place about the change that needs to be taken. They sat on a shelf under the last government. We are acting on them. We are providing for local inquiries, and we're investing more in delivering truth than they ever did.
He cannot name a single place because nothing is happening. He stood there at the dispatch box, promised 5 local inquiries. Nothing is happening. On the last day of term, he had his minister come out to water down the promise to say they would provide funding. That is not good enough. At least 50 towns are affected by rape gangs. Places like Peterborough, Derby, Birmingham, Nottingham, Leicester, Rotherham, Rochdale and Preston. Is he dragging his heels on this because he doesn't want Labour cover-ups exposed?
Mr. Speaker, I spent 5 years prosecuting this case. Mr. Speaker, I was the prosecutor that brought the first case. And when that file was brought to my attention, Mr. Speaker, I noticed that one of the defendants had not been prosecuted previously. Far from covering up, I asked for that file so that I could have a look at it. On the back of that, I then changed the entire approach to prosecutions, which was then lauded by the government. We were doing the right thing and brought those prosecutions. So my record was going after where I thought something had gone wrong and putting it right. She stayed silent throughout their years in government, and so did the entire front bench.
Mr. Speaker, he's not the Director of Public Prosecutions anymore. He is the Prime Minister. People want to know what he is going to do now, not talk about what he did years ago. We are asking for a full national inquiry. Andy Burnham wants a national inquiry. He's not Conservative, he's Labour. Harriet Harman wants one. The member for Rotherham wants one. All of the victims I have met want a full national inquiry. He keeps talking about local inquiries, yet they have not got going. And they haven't got going because local authorities don't want to investigate themselves. Local inquiries cannot force witnesses to appear. Local inquiries can't force people to give evidence under oath. So why won't he have a national inquiry?
Mr. Speaker, we've had a national inquiry. We've had recommendations. There are hundreds of recommendations that have been made in relation to this issue. It is a serious issue. I strongly believe that we should implement the recommendations that have already been made. And that is what we are doing. I strongly believe we should listen to victims, and we've been listening to victims on this side for decades and working with victims for decades in relation to what they want, which is local inquiries, and we've set those local inquiries up.
Mr. Speaker, he says we should listen to victims. The victims want a national inquiry. We haven't had a national inquiry. We had the child sex abuse inquiry, which Conservatives launched. There is still more to be done. It didn't cover this scandal in detail. In Manchester, just last year, authorities were still covering up abuse. The local inquiry chair there has quit. Bradford Council, an area of some of the worst abuses, refuses any inquiry, local or national. Whether it's the streets of Birmingham or the Town Hall of Bradford, it is chaos and cover-ups with Labour councils. When will he show leadership and do the right thing?
The right thing is to implement the recommendations that we've got, which is what they palpably failed to do in government. The right thing to do is to have the national inquiries that we need, which was what the victims want. The right thing to do is to invest in our criminal justice system so we can bring people to justice. They've absolutely collapsed the criminal justice system. Prosecutions for rape under their watch, they go up or down. They went down to record lows. Investment in prosecuting these cases went down. Their record was abysmal. They should hang their heads in shame.
Mr. Speaker, this is just distraction tactics. He hasn't read the recommendations, because if he had read the recommendations, he would know none of them would tackle this issue. The fact is, if I were standing where he is, we would have had a national inquiry months ago. This issue is personal for me. I have met many of the victims. This is about the protection of children. Nothing else is more important. In the last few days, Mr. Speaker, I've been to Wiltshire, Lincolnshire, Northumberland, Kent. All of them have outstanding children's social care. Do you know why, Mr. Speaker? Because they're all run by Conservatives. That's the difference that Conservative councillors make. Isn't the choice tomorrow between chaos and cover-ups under Labour councils or better services under the Conservatives?
She says they'd have a national inquiry. 14 years. 14 years, and they didn't do it. It's so hollow. And yes, tomorrow is the first opportunity the country has to pass their verdict on the Leader of the Opposition and the party opposite after the general. Have they changed? Have they learned? It's passing verdict on the Leader of the Opposition. We'll see you next week.
Right. Nadia Winter.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I wish that the Leader of the Opposition would stop weaponising victims of child sexual political points. It's damaging victims, and if she cared about child protection, she wouldn't be doing that. It's a disgrace. You're a disgrace. Mr. Speaker, new data shows that in March last year, in Hyson Green and Arboretum ward in my constituency, 64% of children were in poverty, the highest proportion in the whole of the East Midlands, and a damning indictment of the previous Conservative government. One of the proudest achievements of the last Labour government was the action it took on child poverty. Can the Prime Minister confirm that this Labour government will do everything in its power to eliminate child poverty, and that its task force has not ruled out abolishing the two-child benefit limit, the single most cost-effective way to pull children out of poverty?
Minister.
Well, she's absolutely right to raise the disgraceful record of the previous government, which saw an extra 900,000 children in poverty. I'm proud of Labour's record in reducing child poverty, which is what we do in government, and the task force exploring every lever to reduce child poverty.
Leader of the Liberal Democrats, Sir Edward Davey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And on behalf of my party, can I send our congratulations to Mark Carney and the Liberal Party of Canada on their historic victory. We wish them well as Canada continues to stand up strongly to President Trump's tariffs and threats. Mr. Speaker, Canada has learned what happens when you do a trade deal with President Trump. He can't be trusted to stick with it. The Prime Minister didn't answer my question last week, and he didn't answer my honourable friend, the member for Wokingham, just now. So let me ask again. Will the government give members of this House a vote on the floor of this House on any deal he agrees with President Trump? Yes or no?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we are in negotiations with the US in relation to a deal. We will act, obviously, in the national interest to make sure that if there is a deal, it's the right deal for our country. If it is secured, it'll go through the known procedures for this House.
Sir David.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm very disappointed in that reply. There was no yes or no response. We do want a vote, and we will keep pressing him and his government on that. But turning to a domestic issue now, Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend, the member for Dorking and Hawley, has taken up the cause of Fiona Lascaris, whose autistic adult son, Christopher, was horrifically exploited and then murdered by a convicted criminal. As ITV News has reported, when Fiona tried to get a mental capacity assessment for her son, she was dismissed. So Christopher never got the support that might have saved his life. We're going to try to change the law so families' concerns over a loved one's mental capacity have to be considered. Will the Prime Minister give his personal backing to that change to stop another tragedy like Christopher's?
Prime Minister.
Well, I thank him for raising that terrible case, and I think the thoughts of the whole House will be with Christopher's family and friends affected by this, and we'll certainly look into what else we can do, and if there's further details that can be given to me of the particular case, I'll make sure that we follow it up.
Jenko.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to start by congratulating Truro City Football Club, who've gone from homelessness to league champions in one season. Yeah. In Cornwall, clean energy is a huge opportunity. We're fortunate to have vast natural resources, onshore, offshore winds, geothermal and tidal. We have a strategically vital port and a workforce ready to step up. I welcome that Falmouth Community Hospital will be getting new solar panels and benefiting from those first investments made by GB Energy. As we pursue our Clean Power Plan, will the Prime Minister confirm this is just the beginning of that investment in renewables in Cornwall?
Can I add my congratulations to Truro? Clean energy investments are powering our plan for change, Mr. Speaker, and that's just the beginning. We'll go further. 200 schools and hundreds of NHS sites across the country will benefit from GB Energy's first solar projects, including Falmouth Community Hospital in my honourable friend's constituency. Hospitals will save, Mr. Speaker, £45,000 a year off their energy bills, with that money going back to the frontline services. That's the better future we're building, good for patients, good for jobs growth and our energy security.
Nigel Farage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To date, so far this year, 10,000 young, undocumented males have illegally crossed the English Channel into our country, a 40% increase on this time last year, many coming from cultures that are somewhat alien to ours. They are being housed at a cost of many billions of pounds a year in hotels and increasingly in private rented homes. The effect on communities is one of a sense of deep unfairness, actually bordering on resentment. In Runcorn alone, there are 750 of these young men. Just in one. Is it not time to admit that Smash the Gangs was nothing more than an election slogan and not a policy? And isn't it time to declare a national emergency and to act accordingly?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we are passing a borders bill with extensive powers to smash the gangs. These are terrorist-like powers that give powers to the police to intercept where they think the suspects are committing people smuggling, which is a vile trade. We must take back control of our borders after the last government lost control. But what did he and his party do? Did they support those extra measures to actually smash the gang? No, they went in the lobby with this lot in their new coalition to vote against them. And let's be clear what a vote for his party means. It means a vote to charge for the NHS. It means a pro-Putin foreign policy and a vote against workers' rights. And now we hear, Mr. Speaker, he's recruited Liz Truss as his new top advisor, as he was cheering on the mini-budget.
Just silence. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For years, my constituents in Orrell have suffered from a lack of local health provision. But next month, that will begin to change, thanks to a new partnership that I built with our local NHS, Wigan Athletic and Wigan Warriors at a Centre for Excellence in Women's Sport. This will be a shining example of shifting healthcare from hospitals into communities. So can I urge the Prime Minister to continue with our plan for change and ignore the member for Clacton who, for decades, has pushed to dismantle our NHS so that my constituents must pay to see their doctor?
Well, I see the member for Clacton complaining, but what did he say? He said we're going to have to move to an insurance-based system of healthcare. His words. If you can afford it, you pay. Not under our watch, Mr. Speaker. While he's busy taking Liz Truss's advice and fawning over Putin, we're driving down waiting lists, 3 million extra appointments delivered, and waiting lists slashed in the most deprived areas. That's 6 times the waiting list will come down, including during the winter periods. We're rebuilding our NHS, rebuilding our country of the future, and delivering for working people.
Liz Jarvis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just before Christmas, thousands of my constituents in Eastleigh were left without water after yet another incident involving Southern Water, the latest in a long series of issues, including outages and sewage dumping in our precious chalk stream, the River Itchen. Yet this month, my constituents face water bill hikes of 47%. Does the Prime Minister understand why my constituents are so angry about this? And what reassurances can he give my constituents that Southern Water and Ofwat will be held to account?
Prime Minister.
Well, I thank her for raising this, and the party opposite should apologise to her constituents for allowing record sewage into our waterways. Our Water Act will clean up our rivers, lakes and seas. Under new powers which came into effect last week, in fact, water bosses can now face years in jail for concealing sewage spills. We've banned the payment of bonuses and introduced new powers. And of course, we're delivering a major review through our Water Commission. And I'll reassure the member we won't hesitate to take further steps.
Sam Colley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Listening to residents in North West Cambridgeshire on the doorstep and in local coffee mornings, there's a clear message. People want local police that have the time and resources to get to know crime in their areas and tackle it at the root. And I know our Labour mayoral candidate's committed to that as she's elected tomorrow. So could the Prime Minister update residents across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough on how our plan for change is tackling crime and antisocial behaviour and boosting police ranks by 13,000 officers that will be visible in all local communities?
The party opposite decimated neighbourhood police, and crimes like shoplifting and antisocial behaviour ran rife. I can tell him what we're doing through the plan for change: extra police officers, extra PCSOs and more special constables. On top of that, Mr. Speaker, a named officer for every community and more teams out in our town centres on Friday and Saturday nights. That's what you get with a Labour mayor working with a Labour government to deliver change for Cambridgeshire and Peterborough.
Josh Coburn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Eastbourne War veteran Staff Sergeant Pauline Cole is a veteran who sustained injuries while serving our country. She was awarded military compensation. But because military compensation is currently considered income by this government, her pension credit has been cut from £77 a week to just £11 a week. We've met with the relevant minister to try to address this to no avail. So I want to ask the Prime Minister, with the anniversary, the 80th anniversary of VE Day just next week, will he meet with Pauline, who's in the gallery, and I, to address this injustice and to ensure that no veteran is penalised for serving our country?
Prime Minister.
Can I thank him for raising this important issue with us. We will always stand up for those who serve our country. And I paid tribute to Pauline for her service, and I will make sure that she gets the appropriate meeting that she wants and needs to discuss her specific case.
Julie Mims.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This week, thanks to this Labour government, hundreds of free breakfast clubs have opened across our country. Will the Prime Minister join me in sending good wishes to the staff and pupils at Castle Carrick, Udale, Longtown, Inglewood, Brook Street, Blackford, Hallbank Gate and Bishop Harvey Goodwin schools in my constituency, which are among the first to benefit from this important scheme? And can he confirm that this is just the start of Labour's plan for change to deliver for working parents?
Prime Minister. Well, look, let me pay tribute to all the staff in her constituency who are working in the breakfast clubs, which, of course, Mr. Speaker, deliver free breakfast clubs, 30 minutes of free childcare, saving working parents £450 a year, and we've opened the first 750 across the country. There'll be many more to come, Mr. Speaker. We are, of course, also saving parents £50 a year by making school uniforms cheaper, something the Leader of the Opposition ordered all her troops to vote against.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The playing of music and loud videos on public transport without headphones is becoming increasingly common. The various bylaws outlawing such antisocial behaviour are clearly not working, whilst planned cuts to the British Transport Police are bound to make matters worse. Will the Prime Minister back the Lib Dem plan to introduce effective enforcement and a publicity campaign to persuade people to plug in their headphones? After which, you never know, perhaps we can encourage the uncivil minority to take their feet off the seats.
Prime Minister.
Well, he raises a really important question of antisocial behaviour. They're laughing about it. That really sums up what they did in the last 14 years. He knows there are already strict rules in place to prevent antisocial behaviour, including fines of up to £1,000. But we are focused on tackling antisocial behaviour. It's not low level. It does affect people and their communities and their sense of safety and what they can do with their own lives. And that's why an additional £1.2 billion has been set aside for policing, 13,000 new neighbourhood police officers, new respect orders, and a named officer in every community. We take this seriously. They laugh about it.
Bel Ribeiro Addy.
Mr. Speaker, rent in my constituency is becoming exceedingly unaffordable, with the ONS's most recent data estimating that the average price of rents have risen by over 10% in the last year, whilst average wages haven't risen at the same level. And I know several metro mayors are calling for the power to control rents in their region to help tackle the issue, and the steps in the Renters' Rights Bill to cap market rents at the market rate are positive. But as landlords are the ones setting the market rates, renters in my constituency are fearful that this won't be enough to protect them from rising rents. So can the Prime Minister tell me what steps this government is taking to bring down rental prices?
Prime Minister.
She's absolutely right to raise this important issue. Communities across the country are facing the consequences of the utter failure of the party opposite to build enough homes. Our Renters' Right Bill improves the system for 11 million private renters, blocking demands for multiple months of rent in advance, and finally abolishing no-fault evictions, something they said they'd do over and over again, and as usual, never got round to doing. Mr. Speaker, that's backed up by major planning reforms, our New Homes Accelerator, and £600 million to deliver 300,000 homes in London, part of our 1.5 million homes we'll build across the country that are desperately needed.
Sir Bernard.
Does the Prime Minister recall from our history that even during the Blitz, the concert pianist Dame Maura Hess continued performing her piano recitals at the National Gallery, including the performance of German music, like J.S. Bach's Jesu Joy of Man's Desiring. As a trustee of the Parliament Choir and as a singer, can I ask him to lend his support to Parliament's own VE Day celebration, which will be next Wednesday evening in Westminster Hall, when we will perform in the presence of His Royal Highness the Duke of Kent and both speakers of both houses, not only that Bach chorale, but the music of our other allies and, of course, some British music too. Tickets are still available.
Prime Minister.
Can I wish him the very best of luck? It will be a fantastic event, and it's just one of the many important celebrations that that are taking place to commemorate VE Day. I would encourage the whole House to buy those remaining tickets to go along and attend the concert, which I think is in Westminster Hall, as well as the many street parties and other events that will be across the country. And I look forward to paying my own tributes on VE Day, but I wish him luck.
Sarah Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I welcome the action taken by the government to fix our NHS and deliver 2 million more appointments, something my constituents are already benefiting from. Together with Warrington and Halton NHS Trust, I recently submitted a ready-to-go proposal for a new urgent treatment centre and outpatients facility in Warrington. Warrington has over 200,000 residents and no urgent treatment centre. The proposal would reduce A&E waiting times and deliver 100,000 appointments every year. Will the Prime Minister or Health Secretary agree to meet with me and local health partners to discuss this transformational project?
Prime Minister.
Well, I'm happy to make sure that my honourable friend meets the Health Secretary. Mr. Speaker, we have got waiting lists down for 6 months now in a row, delivering 3 million extra appointments. The Further Faster 20 programme is doubling the rate at which waiting lists are falling, including in her trust. And of course, earlier this week, we froze prescription charges at under £10. There's a lot that's been done, a lot more to do, but our plan for change is working, getting the NHS back on its feet.
Leila Moran.
Mr. Speaker, the non-disclosure agreement was entirely one-sided, gagging me, but not the men or the execs involved. It covered not just business matters, but everything painful I'd endured. I ended up in hospital. These are the words of a victim who suffered intolerable sexual misconduct in her workplace. Does the Prime Minister agree with me and members across this House that the misuse of NDAs in cases like this are totally unacceptable? And if so, will he help us in amending the Employment Rights Bill going through the Lords now to stop this pervasive practice once and for all?
Prime Minister.
She's right to highlight the misuse of NDAs, and I don't think anybody would countenance the misuse of NDAs, particularly in a case as serious as the one that she cited, which is why we're looking whatever we can do to make sure they're not misused.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. After 14 years of a Conservative government who let fly tipping increase to record levels across the country, my constituents in Ealing Southall will welcome the Prime Minister's announcement today that fly tippers will now face tough action, new technology for enforcement and up to 5 years in prison. Could the Prime Minister set out what other steps he is taking to help councils tackle fly tipping and the difference this will make to communities like Ealing Southall?
Thank you for raising this issue. Under the last government, we saw 1 million incidents of fly tipping. Under Conservative councils, we see enforcement down and fly tipping up. Look at Tory-led Northumberland, where incidents of fly tipping are up 76%. We're introducing, Mr. Speaker, tough powers to seize and crush the vehicles of commercial fly tippers who now face up to 5 years in prison for operating illegally. That's a Labour government clearing up the mess left by the party opposite.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Prime Minister. A week tomorrow, the whole nation will come together to commemorate VE Day. Those who fought in World War II, including my own father, would often attest that no one did more to maintain their morale in adversity than Dame Vera Lynn, the force's sweetheart. A doughty band of campaigners for several years have been trying to create a national memorial in her honour. I'm pleased to tell the House they now have a stunning design. They have a site, appropriately at Dover, and they've already raised over 3/4 of the funding that they would need. So at this very special time, would the Prime Minister lend his support in principle to this noble endeavour? Would he be prepared to accept a personal briefing on the campaign, in which case I suspect that he and I will meet again?
Always a pleasure. But look, I'm going to congratulate him on his campaign. It is really important, and many people were delighted, I think, to join that campaign. Dame Vera is sewn into our nation's soul, providing the soundtrack for our greatest generation, and so it's particularly timely. So I'll support the campaign that he has done so much to promote.
Adam Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Whether it is the crevasse on the island outside of Asda in Long Eaton or the array of tyre poppers on Quarry Hill Road in Ilkeston, every day my inbox is filled with complaints about potholes that Conservative Derbyshire County Council has failed to fix. Given that the government has poured £1.6 billion of extra funding into road repairs and that tomorrow is the Derbyshire County Council elections, does the Prime Minister agree with me that it is high time that Erewash and the wider Derbyshire got itself a Labour council that will actually repair the roads?
Well, he's absolutely right. Conservative Derbyshire County Council is home to more potholes than anywhere else in the country, and drivers are paying the price. Mr. Speaker, our plan for change has committed enough funding to fix 7 million extra potholes this year, and for the first time, councils like Derbyshire must publish how many potholes they've actually repaired in order to get the cash. The party opposite left Britain's roads crumbling. We are fixing them.
Sammy Wilson.
Mr. Speaker, the blackouts in Spain, which have caused chaos, the realisation amongst many backbenchers in his own party that thousands of jobs are being lost in Scotland in the oil industry, and the fact that businesses are facing energy costs which are making them uncompetitive and consumers being plunged into poverty, fuel poverty. Does he not recognise that his net zero policy is not only bad, but it's mad? And indeed, his own former leader is now accepting this. Will he not accept the advice from someone within his own party if he won't accept advice from this side of the House?
Prime Minister.
Well, many years on the opposite benches, I learned when asking questions at PMQs not just to read the headline on a Wednesday morning, but to look at some of the detail. What Tony Blair said is we should have more carbon capture. We've invested in carbon capture. That's many jobs across different parts of the country. He said that AI should be used. We agree with that. We've invested huge amounts in AI on the jobs of the future. He also said we need domestic targets so that businesses have their certainty. If you look at the detail of what Tony Blair said, he's absolutely aligned with what we're doing here. These are the jobs and the security of the future. I would also say that we shouldn't weaponise the difficult position that people in Spain and other countries find themselves in at a very difficult time.
Final question, Alex Bellinger.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I welcome the government's decision this month to secure British steel, and at a time when European security is critical, it is defence manufacturers in the Black Country, like Summers Forge in Hellsarian and BB Price in Cradley Heath, that will be using that steel to make the military equipment that our defence needs. Will the Prime Minister commit to make manufacturing investment in the Black Country a national priority so that we can live up to our industrial heritage and create the high-quality defence jobs that our region so desperately needs?
Prime Minister.
I pay tribute to my honourable and gallant friend for his service to his country. He understands our national security and economic security go hand in hand. Mr. Speaker, it's vital that defence investment creates more jobs, apprenticeships and opportunities in the Black Country and across the United Kingdom. That's why we've launched a new hub to give up to 12,000 small firms better access to defence contracts. And of course, we're raising defence spending, the highest sustained increase since the Cold War, something the party opposite failed to do in 14 years in office.
Right, we'll let the front bench change over.
That brings us to the end of this week's Prime Minister's Questions session there. Let me introduce our guest for this part of Politics Live. For the government, Ellie Reeves, Chair of the Labour Party. For the opposition, for the Conservatives, Kevin Hollinrake, Shadow Secretary of State of Housing and Communities. And for the BBC, Henry Zeffman, our Chief Political Correspondent. Just to say at the beginning of Prime Minister's Questions, Keir Starmer informed the House that the RAF had been involved in military action, in airstrikes, a joint action with the Americans, with the United States, against Yemen's Houthi rebels overnight. And John Healey, the Defence Secretary, will be making a statement shortly to the House. We hope to bring you part of what he says. In fact, he's on his feet now, I can see, in the chamber towards the end of the programme. But let's get back to what Kemi Badenoch, the leader of the Conservatives, questioned the Prime Minister about. This has been something of an ongoing row between the government and the opposition, and Kemi Badenoch Badenoch has been calling for a national inquiry into grooming gangs. We talked about it before Prime Minister's questions. The Prime Minister and the government have launched a rapid review, an audit, if you like, by Baroness Louise Casey, looking into whether there are grounds for a more wide-reaching inquiry into grooming gangs. But Kemi Badenoch made the accusation, Henry, that Keir Starmer had resisted calls for a national inquiry into this because he doesn't want Labour cover-ups to be exposed. What's she referring to?
Well, the specific use of the phrase cover-up in her first question was related to something that Jess Phillips, who's a Home Office Minister, said in the House of Commons earlier this week when being questioned by an independent MP, actually. Jess Phillips said, yes, there were cover-ups in some parts of the country, and I think she said they were for reasons of sensitivities or intended sensitivities around multiculturalism. So that was what Kemi Badenoch was using as the hook for the broader questioning about grooming gangs. I mean, it's worth remembering, right at the start of the year, Westminster was totally convulsed by this issue, and a lot of that was because of Elon Musk actually having propelled it to the top of the news agenda, which is an entirely sort of separate kind of element to this. But nevertheless, there was a lot of determination on the part of government to be seen to be taking action. And what they came up with were these 5 local inquiries, but preceded, as you say, by that review by Dame Louise Casey. We're told, I think we originally expected that Louise Casey report would come in April. Now seems like it's, well, evidently, it's going to be in May at some point. But Kemi Badenoch said in January, when she tried to force the government to hold a national inquiry, that she would try again and again and again, and I think this is evidence that she is.
Right, why won't you just have a national inquiry, Ellie Reeves?
Well, there was an inquiry carried out by Baroness J, and a number of recommendations were made as a result of that. And actually what we've said is that we want to get on with implementing the recommendations. So, for example, setting up the Child Protection Authority, which we're in the process of doing, as well as mandatory reporting requirements. What we do want to see is local inquiries, and that's why we put 5 million into that, looking like Oldham would be first, but also setting out terms of references for other local authorities to do those inquiries. And that might take different forms in different areas.
All right, but the issue here is that the inquiry, the 7-year national inquiry that was undertaken by Alexis J, that was into child sex abuse and child sex exploitation right across the board. And it was shocking. The findings were shocking. It did also include grooming gangs, and there were very many high-profile cases where groups of men, predominantly of Pakistani heritage, were convicted of sexually abusing and raping mainly white girls in the UK, in a number of towns across the country. But her inquiry went broader than that. And what the Conservatives are asking for is a national inquiry looking specifically at these cases of grooming gangs and whether there is a pattern happening across the UK. That is different. You accept that because otherwise you wouldn't be having these local inquiries happening in a number of towns. So why not a national inquiry into that specifically?
Well, Baroness J's inquiry was a wide-reaching inquiry.
It covered
was also
everything.
Very thorough. It took 7 years, and it did cover everything. But one of the things that Louise Casey is looking at in her inquiry is that issue of ethnicity, and I think that's right that she does that. It's also important that local inquiries can take place, and that might look different in different areas. In some of those, they may be things like victims' panels, for example. And it's important to work with victims in those areas to make sure that what the local inquiry looks like reflects what victims are calling for locally.
I mean, Kemi Badenoch says it's personal to her, this issue. I'm sure it's personal to many, many people. It's also something that previous Conservative governments could have done themselves. Why it's become such a cause célèbre now in opposition is mysterious and curious. You also didn't implement many of the recommendations, if any of them, from Alexis J.
It's indefensible not having an inquiry. There is no way in the world that this will stand. A national inquiry is needed. We know an awful lot more now than we did then, Jo. That's fair to say.
What, in the matter of a year?
Well, we did much on this. Commissioning the original inquiry from Alexis Jay. The solutions to that, the recommendations to that were being implemented. We also put in place, yes, they were. Yes, they were. You know they take time. These things take time.
Which ones were implemented?
Well, one thing we did, which is very, very important, is the Grooming Gangs Task Force, which made hundreds of arrests and many prosecutions. That's what people want to see. But underlying this, and you're right to say, the Alexis Jay inquiry did not look at the specifics around this issue.
He did look at it, though.
It did not look at the specifics. It certainly didn't look at the cover-ups. Now, if people want to understand the issues around this, and a government minister has said there were cover-ups. So if you want to look at the detail behind this, look at Katie Lamb's speech to the Commons on Twitter, which she clearly identifies there were people who were complicit in this within the local authorities of these gangs. This is very worrying. There is no way you can say that local inquiries, which will be determined in terms of the extent of them by potentially the people who are guilty of the cover-up, it's OK, that's enough. It's not enough. We've all got responsibility to protect our children. We need a national inquiry, Ellie. The Prime Minister should agree to it.
Absolutely got a responsibility to
But what about the
children.
cover-ups?
But there were you had 14 years to do this. You didn't take action on it.
True,
and the recommendations from Baroness Jay weren't implemented. We're getting on with implementing the recommendations. We've given £5 million to these local inquiries. We're increasing sentences for perpetrators. We're getting on and doing the job.
Why did Jess Phillips, your own minister, say or admit, yeah, there have been cover-ups. There were cover-ups in the past.
Well, I can't answer for Jess, but what I do know is this government is getting on with delivering those recommendations and actually acting where the Conservatives didn't in their time in government.
That's just not true. But even if that was true, the situation today is indefensible. There is clear evidence. One of your own government ministers has said it. There were cover-ups of these horrendous abuses. And you're not willing to have an inquiry. The inquiries, whatever you put in place, will not have the power as to call witnesses.
Let's see what Louise Casey says in her report
not have the power to call witnesses. They'll not have the power to make people give evidence under oath. That's what we need to get to the bottom of this. So if people are guilty of those cover-ups, they can be held to account. That's the only way we'll stop these things happening.
Right. Victims, survivors, are calling for a national inquiry. Do you think, even from a perception point of view and a transparency point of view, if there is a feeling, accusations or even admitted by a minister of cover-ups in local areas, people being complicit, that must be exposed?
Let's see what Louise Casey says in her report when it comes out next month. Victims have to be at the centre of this and will be at the centre of these local inquiries which we are funding. And I think that's really, really important that victims' voices are heard.
Right. I mean, the former chair of the Equalities and Human Rights Commission, Sir Trevor Phillips, described your approach to grooming gang probes as utterly shameful. He went on to say it's so obvious they're not doing this because of the demographic of people involved, largely Pakistani Muslim background and also in Labour-held seats and councils who would be offended by it. Is he right?
Well, Louise Casey is looking at ethnicity as part of that review that she's doing as part of that audit. So we're not shying away from that issue. It's precisely one of the things that Louise Casey has been tasked with looking at.
Right, why don't you just wait for Louise Casey to come back? She's very respected. She's going to do a thorough job. She will set out what she thinks is necessary and where these inquiries should happen.
Of course, we'll have to wait, won't we? Because the government's got control of this. But they can't get off the hook on this. The worry is, of course...
Of what? What are they on the hook for?
Because the potential of cover-ups, potential in Labour-run councils. This is what's sat beneath this, Jo. That's the concern. And, of course, then there's a vested interest from the Prime Minister of a Labour government who's defending Labour councils and Labour politicians. That's the worry here. And clearly Trevor Phillips is worried about it. It's not just Jess Phillips. Andy Burnham has called for an inquiry. Harriet Harman's called for an inquiry.
Louise Casey's doing that audit. We're getting on with implementing the recommendations. We've put money behind these local inquiries. We're getting on and doing the job that the Conservatives, frankly, failed to do
let them set
in
their own
14 years.
terms of reference,
And by the way,
Ellie.
under the Conservatives' watch, rape prosecutions in this country fell to record levels.
All you do is trying to get away from the issue. The reality is...
If we're trying to get away with it, we wouldn't commission Louise Casey to do a report.
What Trevor Phillips was saying is what you've now done, having said you'll commission even 5 local inquiries, which wasn't sufficient. Now he's said he's criticised what you've said, that they'll let those councils set their own terms of reference, and when these councils themselves might be complicit, or some of these people within the councils might be complicit, how can that be right?
We're working with them to set terms of reference, and that's really important. Things might look different in different areas depending on what victims want.
I'm sure they will look different
and are calling for. But we're getting on with that work. You know, we're not trying to shy away from this. Louise Casey is doing that audit commissioned by us. We want to see the results of that. At the same time, we've set up that Child Protection Authority. There's mandatory reporting, increased sentences for perpetrators. We're getting on with it.
Right. I mean, Alexis Jay herself, when this was, as you say, it sort of exploded onto the political agenda earlier this year, said it was actually inaction by previous governments in terms of implementing her recommendations, that would have been a good place to start. There are some other questions, Henry. I mean, do you think yourself that the government will end up doing a national inquiry? They're obviously waiting for this audit. We don't know the locations apart from Oldham, but they've said there'll be at least 5 local inquiries. It is also interesting that we don't know where they're going to be. There could be more, surely, than 5.
Yeah, and I think Jess Phillips actually acknowledged earlier this week that there could end up being more than 5. I mean, to your first question, yeah, my analysis is it's quite possible that there will end up being a national inquiry once Louise Casey has reported. I mean, certainly I speak to some Labour MPs, just some, to stress, and there's an awful lot of Labour MPs, but some Labour MPs who are a bit frustrated with the government on this, see this as reflecting a sort of broader instinct in different parts of government at different times to commission reviews. But on this, they want the government to kind of embody the fury of their constituents about this, and they're a bit concerned that they're not quite doing that, as this issue does grow online, and obviously the Conservatives are trying to keep it at the centre of the political agenda.
All right, let's talk about something different. Again, we did discuss it briefly before Prime Minister's questions, and that is about the Belfast rave rap band known as Kneecap. Well, that is their name, in fact. They're also known for being pretty riotous and controversial, but they have certainly hit the sort of national headlines because of a concert video that shows them calling for or saying the only good Tory is a dead Tory. They say that was taken out of context, and they apologise for the hurt caused to the families of the murdered MPs Jo Cox and Sir David Amess. But Chris Philp, the Shadow Home Secretary, has tweeted this: the Glastonbury Festival should not be providing a platform or legitimacy to a group, Kneecap, that has allegedly incited the murder of democratically elected MPs and expressed support for terrorist groups. That is why I've written to the organisers to urge them to cancel Kneecap's invitation to play at the festival. Ellie, do you back Chris Philp? Should they drop it?
Well, look, I don't think it's for a government minister to say who should and shouldn't play at festivals. Certainly, if I was the organiser of Glastonbury, I wouldn't have them on the line up, and I think that the Glastonbury organisers need to think very, very carefully about this. Those comments were absolutely appalling, and it is right that the police are investigating them.
Right, but you do think then that Glastonbury should drop them?
I don't think it's for me to say what which bands should and shouldn't play at festivals. But if I was organising Glastonbury, I certainly wouldn't have them playing.
Should it be up to government ministers to decide who plays in the lineup at Glastonbury Festival or any other festival?
Well, clearly not. There's no mechanism to do that. But it doesn't stop the Home Secretary himself writing to the Glastonbury organisers and saying that's what should happen, because you're giving these people a platform to spread hate and to incite violence. It's clearly what they're doing. And what I can't get with this group, these individuals, is they say this horrendous stuff. And let's look at this. There are nearly 7 million people voted Conservative in the last election. 7 million people. They're saying all those people are evil, bad. This is horrendous. It used to be in this country that you could disagree with somebody respectfully, and now you disagree with them because they are evil. It is absolutely outrageous. They're inciting violence, clearly. And then when somebody picks them up on it, to saying this is, oh, no, we didn't mean that. We didn't mean you should go and kill a Tory or kill an elected politician. They say one thing, then they back off when they're under pressure, and it's outrageous that these people are able to even say this, never mind perform at one of the UK's leading pop festivals.
Right, but where do you draw the line, Kevin Hollinrake, when it comes to, on one side, maybe freedom of speech, on the other, inciting, as you say it, inciting hate, whether it is at a concert, at a gig, or online, for example? Where do you draw the line?
Well, inciting violence. I mean, it's quite clear the law says that. You know, there are limits on freedom of speech. Of course, there always will be, because it's wrong that you would incite others to commit a crime. That's where you draw the line.
Right, and in terms then of what government should do, I mean, John Swinney, the SNP in Scotland, has also called for them to be dropped from a concert there. So you say it's not up to government ministers, but actually politicians are getting involved here.
Well, I've made my view, I think, pretty clear about kneecap and whether they should be in at Glastonbury. What they said was appalling. It is under investigation by the police, and I think that's incredibly important, and we'll have to see the outcome of that investigation. But the comments that they made should have absolutely no place, and I'm really, really shocked and appalled by them.
I said earlier that we would try and have a bit of John Healey, the Defence Secretary, talking about the action taken overnight. Let's have a listen.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday UK forces conducted a joint operation with US allies against a Houthi military facility in Yemen. Our intelligence analysis identified a cluster of buildings 15 miles south of Sana'a used by the Houthis to manufacture drones of the type used to attack ships in the Red Sea and in the Gulf of Aden.
Now, Henry, this is actually the first time since Donald Trump returned to the White House that there has been this joint action, airstrikes against Houthi targets. The Ministry of Defence said that the Royal Air Force, the Typhoon fighter jets, working with the US military, hit a cluster of buildings used by the Houthis to manufacture attack drones. I presume, broadly, the House will be in support of the action that has been taken.
Yes, and we'd already heard earlier today from Priti Patel, the Shadow Foreign Secretary, supporting what the government has done, just as this government, when they were in opposition, supported similar actions by the previous government. I think it's a reminder, and I think it is striking, given how many areas the two main parties disagree. It is striking the continuity that there has been on foreign policy, both in the Middle East and in Ukraine and other areas, since Keir Starmer became Prime Minister. And, you know, that's not actually true in every Western democracy between the main party and the opposition party. So it is quite a notable feature of our politics.
Right, and you would agree with that then, Kevin?
Well, listen, we support this action, of course, and previous actions too. The real worrying thing behind this is the ability for small groups, not very well funded groups in many ways, are able to carry out these strikes, because of it's getting much easier now to develop technologies that strike at what would be previously been targets that would have been much more difficult to do that. So so it's clear we need more spending to counteract these kind of threats. We need more actions. And I think the other thing I would say is, contrary to some assertions coming out from the US, how we stand shoulder to shoulder with the US government time and time again, and have done through history. And I think we should be proud of our efforts, be it Iraq, Afghanistan, Ukraine, indeed this action in the Middle East in the last few hours.
Right, but in terms of when it comes to peace or a peace deal in Ukraine, there are differences there between the Prime Minister and the US President, of course, Donald Trump. But you are perfectly comfortable with all these joint military exercises and action with the United States when it comes to this sort of action?
Yeah, I think that everyone wants to see peace in Ukraine. We've been really clear that what that looks like has got to have Ukraine at the heart of it and at the table, and we have supported President Zelensky in that, and have continued to give military aid, a big boost to military aid recently paid for by profits on frozen Russian assets, for example, and it's right that we continue that support.
Just briefly before we go, the former Labour Prime Minister Tony Blair, his institute, they issued a report on net zero, criticising net zero policies of the government, not the targets themselves, reaching net zero by 2050. We talked about it as well before Prime Minister's questions. Well, they've issued a clarification saying they are supportive of the government in their endeavour. Why do you think the clarification, have they had some heat, do you think, from the government in terms of their criticism about how they're going about it?
Well, to be fair, the original report was about sort of global net zero policies rather than specifically about the UK government. I mean, it didn't sort of specifically identify policies this government was doing, but it was clear that the implication of some of the things this report was talking about, you know, had implications for what the UK government is doing. I mean, clearly it was perceived as a very, 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 very unhelpful intervention by the party he used to lead the day before a set of local elections.
Was it unhelpful?
Well, I read the forward that Tony Blair wrote, and actually, if you look at it, if you read the detail, he talks about support for carbon capture and storage. That's exactly one of the things this government's getting on and doing. Talks about support for small modular reactors. Again, something that we're getting on and doing.
But he also
the
said
clarification is really, really helpful. But broadly supports what we're doing.
Ed Miliband's attempts to phase out fossil fuels in the short term were doomed to fail. That's one of the massive flaws in your policy. You said electricity prices would drop by £300. They've gone up by £300 because really Ed Miliband is determined to spend all our money on stuff that will not work in the short term. You've got to have a smooth transition. That's not what we're seeing right now from your government.
Tony Blair has clarified his position in relation to this. But look, we're getting on and creating the green jobs of the future. Announced today 18,000 training courses to get those green skilled jobs. Ultimately, money off people's bills and energy security away from...
well, there isn't a when, of course, those bills will come down. But that's all we have time for today. Thank you very much to all of my guests for joining me today. And, of course, local elections happening tomorrow.